The chamber was vast, stretching high into the shadows where golden banners swayed gently in the heat of glowing torches. Rows of alien leaders filled the room, their voices rising in laughter that echoed against the walls. At the center of the hall stood a massive circular table carved from black stone, and above it floated a shimmering golden sphere, the projection of Earth. Its light bathed the chamber in brilliance. But to the aliens, it was nothing more than a symbol of mockery. They laughed at the image, their sharp teeth and strange mouths twisting into cruel grins. Their voices clashed, each louder than the other, all speaking of the same thing, the ban on humans. To them, it was an old relic of the Council's laws, an unnecessary warning written in fear long ago. Humans. One of the tall reptilian generals sneered, his scaled hand waving dismissively. Fragile, short-lived, and soft. Why should we fear such creatures? Another alien, tall and cloaked in silver armor, let out a booming laugh. Yes, they were banned for being dangerous. Dangerous to us. I have seen insects with more strength. The chamber roared with laughter again. Even the younger commanders pounded the table, their eyes flashing with amusement. To them, the idea of humanity being so dangerous that an entire galaxy needed to ban their kind was nothing but a ridiculous myth. At the far edge of the room, however, one figure did not laugh. An older warrior stood in silence, half hidden in the shadows. His armor was scarred and worn, the color faded from countless battles. A heavy cloak rested on his shoulders, and his eyes, sharp and cold, never left the projection of Earth. The laughter rolled around him like a storm, but he did not join it. When the noise finally began to fade, his voice cut through the air. "Laugh at the ban," he said slowly, his words deep and steady. "But you laugh because you do not know the truth." The chamber grew quiet for a moment, the sudden break in sound pulling all eyes toward him. Some of the alien leaders frowned, others smirked, and a few chuckled softly, as though amused that the old soldier had dared to speak. One of the younger generals leaned forward, his voice sharp with pride. "And what truth would that be, old one? That the humans were mighty warriors, that they were gods among mortals? Tell us your story so we may laugh even louder." A few others joined the chuckle, but the veteran did not flinch. He stepped forward, into the light, his armor catching the glow of Earth's projection. Scars lined his face, his presence heavy, his eyes colder than steel. When he spoke again, his voice carried across the chamber like thunder. "The ban was not written in fear of myths," he said. "It was written in memory of what humans truly are. You think them weak, you think them fragile, but you have never seen them when they fight. You have never seen what they become when all hope is lost." The chamber shifted uneasily. The laughter had faded now, replaced with murmurs. Some aliens still wore smirks, but their eyes flickered with curiosity. Others frowned, unsure if the veteran's words were warnings or nonsense. The old warrior raised a hand and pointed at the glowing sphere of Earth above the table. "You mock this world, you call its people fragile. But this planet birthed a species unlike any other, a species that turns pain into strength, a species that rises again, even when crushed into the dirt. That is why they were banned. Not because they were weak, but because they were too dangerous to be allowed free." His words hung heavy in the air, settling over the room like a shadow. For the first time, the laughter was gone. The leaders glanced at each other, some frowning, others narrowing their eyes. One alien finally broke the silence, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Dangerous. We are the Council. We are the rulers of 100 worlds. No species has ever broken our power. What can fragile humans do that we should fear?" The veteran's eyes narrowed. He pressed a button on his wrist, and the chamber's massive screens flickered to life. Static filled the air for a moment before the images appeared. "Do you want to know the truth?" the veteran said, his voice quiet but sharp. "Then watch, and learn why the ban was written." The screens brightened, showing the first grainy image: a battlefield, smoke rising, broken soldiers crawling through the dirt. The alien leaders leaned forward, their mocking grins faltering as the footage began to play. The old warrior stepped back into the shadows, his voice echoing one last time across the hall. "You think humans are prey. You think their myths are lies. But tonight, you will see what I have seen, and when you do, you will never laugh again." The chamber fell silent. The only sound was the faint crackle of the screen as the first haunting images of humanity's truth began to play. The aliens who had mocked the ban moments before now sat still, the laughter frozen on their lips, their eyes fixed on the truth that was about to unfold. And so the silence began. The first flickers of the screen drew every eye in the chamber. At first, only static filled the air, a faint hiss echoing in the silence. The alien leaders leaned back, some smirking again as if they expected nothing of worth to appear, but then the image cleared, and the laughter that had once shaken the walls faded into uneasy quiet. The scene showed a battlefield. Smoke rolled like black waves, fires burned high, and shattered machines lay scattered across broken ground. Human soldiers moved through the chaos. Their armor was dented, their weapons cracked, yet they pressed forward. Every step was heavy. With determination, the veteran's voice rose from the shadows, low but sharp. This is not myth, this is not a fable, this is history. The aliens watched. At first, some scoffed. Look at them, one whispered. Their weapons are crude, their armor thin. They fight with desperation, not skill. But the screen told a different story. The humans did not scatter. They did not retreat. Even when outnumbered, they formed lines, covering each other, pushing back with fire that burned brighter than their weapons. One soldier dragged his wounded comrade through the dirt, blood streaming down his side, yet he never let go of his weapon. Another, his arm torn and useless, strapped his gun to his chest and kept firing until the enemy fell. The smirks on the aliens' faces began to fade. The room grew stiller. They fight without reason. One leader muttered, "Why keep going? When death is certain." The veteran stepped forward, the glow of the projection painting his scars in harsh light. Because that is their reason. Humans do not fight to survive. They fight so that others might. They fight so that their enemy pays for every step, every drop of blood. The screen shifted to another recording. This time it was inside a city, its towers burning, its streets torn apart by bombardment. The alien leaders leaned closer. Civilians ran through the chaos, carrying children, guiding the old, but instead of fleeing into the shadows, they armed themselves with whatever they could find: broken weapons, knives, even pieces of rubble. Mothers with fire in their eyes shielded their children with their bodies, and then, when the moment came, they turned and fought. The silence in the chamber grew heavier. The veteran's voice carried like a drumbeat. You have seen soldiers fight, now you see civilians fight. For humans, war is not only for armies, it is for anyone with breath still in their body. This is why they were banned. Because when you fight humans, you do not fight soldiers alone, you fight their entire species. The images changed again. A small group of human defenders stood on a bridge. Alien forces advanced in perfect formation, rows of armor and weapons gleaming under artificial light. The defenders numbered fewer than a dozen. The council leaned forward, expecting surrender, expecting collapse, but what they saw froze them. The humans screamed war cries that shook the bridge, then charged. Their weapons fired until empty. When their guns were spent, they drew blades. When their blades broke, they fought with fists, with teeth, with anything that could wound. One by one they fell, but each time one went down, another rose to take his place. The bridge was soaked in blood, but the enemy did not cross it without paying in kind. By the time the last human fell, hundreds of alien bodies lay scattered around him. The council chamber was deathly still. The earlier laughter now seemed foolish, almost shameful. None dared to smirk, none dared to whisper. The veteran stepped closer to the screen. His voice was calm but carried an edge that sliced through the silence. This is what you call myth. Stories of hopeless battles, of men and women who fought against impossible odds. You laughed at them because you thought no being could do such things. And yet, here is proof. The myths you mock are not lies, they are scars burned into history. One of the younger generals finally spoke, his voice strained. They throw away their lives. That is not strength, that is madness. The veteran's eyes narrowed. And what is more dangerous than an enemy who does not fear death? What weapon do you wield against one who embraces the grave and drags you down with him? That is why they are dangerous. That is why the ban exists. The footage shifted again. Rows of human graves stretched into the distance, marked by simple stones. Soldiers stood in silence, heads bowed. The image was quiet, solemn, yet it carried a weight greater than all the battles before it. The veteran's voice lowered, steady as stone. They do not forget. Every death becomes part of their stories. Every loss becomes a lesson. Every scar becomes a warning. Their myths are not meant to glorify. They are meant to remind. The council sat frozen. Pride slipped from their faces, replaced with something else uneasy. Some stared at the graves, their claws twitching, their throats dry. The veteran turned from the screen, his gaze sweeping across the chamber. You thought the ban was fear of stories. You thought it was weakness. Now you begin to see. The ban is not to protect humans from the galaxy. It is to protect the galaxy from humans. No one laughed now. No one spoke. The golden projection of Earth glowed brighter in the silence, as though watching, as though listening. The old warrior's voice carried one final time before the footage ended. And what you have seen tonight is only the beginning. The chamber sat in silence. The laughter was gone forever. The chamber remained silent long after the last image faded. The alien leaders sat stiff in their seats, their earlier pride drained away. The golden glow of Earth's hologram still floated above the council table, turning their uneasy faces into pale masks. No one dared to speak, no one dared to laugh. The veteran stood tall, his figure calm, his voice carrying across the room. You have seen soldiers and civilians. You have seen humans fight even when all hope is gone, but you have not yet understood why they are feared. To understand, you must see more. He pressed the controls on his wrist. The screens came alive again, showing a scene far different from the last. This time, it was not a battlefield. It was the frozen surface of a distant planet, winds howling, ice stretching as far as the eye could see, the chamber filled with the sound of storms. Through the blizzard, humans marched. Their clothing was ragged, their supplies nearly gone, yet they moved forward. Each step was heavy, their faces pale, but not one of them turned back. The camera followed them as they built fires from scraps, as they dug shelters into the ice, as they pressed on into storms that no other species would dare enter. The alien leaders frowned, confused. One muttered, "Why continue when the land itself tries to kill them?" The veteran's reply was sharp, because turning back was never an option. For humans, survival is not given, it is earned. They do not ask if they can endure, they endure, and then they rise stronger. The footage shifted again. Now a desert stretched across the horizon, endless dunes under a burning sun. Humans staggered through the heat, their lips cracked, their skin blistered. Some fell, but others carried them forward, refusing to abandon even the weakest among them. When night came, they rose again and continued, step after step. The alien leaders shifted in their seats. They were beginning to see the pattern, and it unsettled them. The veteran's voice deepened. You think their strength lies only in war. You are wrong. Their strength is in defiance itself. When the world tells them they cannot live, they answer by living. When nature itself tries to kill them, they make it theirs. Their myths of survival are not legends. They are memories. The chamber grew colder, the silence pressing down heavier with every word. The screens changed again, showing footage of war once more. This time, alien fleets advanced in the void of space. Their ships were larger, stronger, bristling with weapons. Human ships faced them, smaller and weaker, outnumbered 10-1. The aliens in the chamber smirked again, expecting to see human defeat, but their smirks quickly vanished. The humans did not retreat. Their ships darted between the massive cruisers, weaving like wolves among giants. When their weapons failed, they rammed. When their hulls cracked, they detonated themselves in bursts of fire that tore enemy ships apart. One small frigate rammed into a capital ship's core, shattering it. In an explosion so bright the chamber glowed with its light, gasps filled the council. Several leaders leaned back, their eyes wide, their claws tightening around their chairs. The veteran's voice thundered, "You call it madness. But tell me what empire can stand against an enemy that turns death into victory? What weapon can you wield against one who does not fear the grave?" The images froze on a single human ship, broken and aflame, drifting through the void. Its crew stood at the windows, saluting even as fire consumed them. The silence in the chamber deepened. No one spoke. The air itself felt heavier, as if even the walls understood the weight of what had been shown. The veteran stepped closer to the council table. His eyes were sharp, his presence unshakable. This is why their myths live. Every tale you mocked is born from truth. Every story you dismissed is a warning. You laugh at them because you believe no creature would ever do such things, but humans do, and they will do it again. One of the younger commanders, his voice shaking, finally spoke. But why? Why throw themselves into death so willingly? The veteran's gaze turned toward him, cold and unblinking, because to them surrender is worse than death, because freedom is worth blood, because survival without defiance is no survival at all. That is what you have never understood. That is what the ban protects you from. The screens shifted one final time. The image was simple: a lone human standing atop a hill of rubble, his uniform torn, his body bleeding. Around him lay the broken remains of enemies and allies alike. Yet he did not bow, he did not flee. He raised his weapon high, daring the universe to strike him again. The alien leaders could not look away. The fire in his eyes was too real, too dangerous. It was the same fire they had seen in every clip, every scene, every myth. The veteran's voice dropped to a whisper that carried like thunder. This is humanity. This is why the ban was made. And this is why you must never forget. The image froze. The chamber sat in silence. The laughter that had once filled the air seemed distant. Now, like a memory from another life, the leaders shifted uneasily, their pride cracked, their arrogance broken. The veteran folded his arms, his scars lit by the glow of Earth's hologram. You have seen the truth. You have felt it. And still, this is only the beginning. The chamber was silent, but inside each alien leader, a shadow of fear had begun to grow. The golden hologram of Earth hovered above the council table, glowing brighter as if it listened to every word. The alien leaders sat in silence, their faces pale, their eyes fixed on the frozen image of the lone human who had refused to bow. Even in death, no laughter remained. The chamber, once filled with mocking voices, now echoed only with unease. The veteran did not hurry. He let the silence stretch, pressing on the soldiers' hearts like a heavy weight. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, yet it carried the strength of thunder. You have seen humans fight. You have seen them endure storms and deserts. But there is one thing you still do not understand. Their strength does not lie only in survival. It lies in sacrifice. He pressed the control again. The screens lit up with another scene. This time, the footage showed a burning city. Towers crumbled under alien bombardment. Fires raged across the skyline, choking the air with smoke. The streets were filled with screams and chaos. But through the haze, humans fought back. Soldiers, civilians, even the wounded, none of them ran. Aliens leaned forward, uneasy. Their eyes followed as a mother carried her child into a shelter, then turned back, picking up a rifle from a fallen soldier. She was trembling, her hands bleeding. But she stood in the path of advancing enemies and fired until her weapon overheated. Of the council shifted in their seats, a few turned away. The veteran's voice rose above the screams. Humans do not fight because they think they can win. They fight because surrender is unthinkable. When they cannot live, they die standing. And in dying, they make sure their enemy falls with them. The footage cut to a group of human defenders on a collapsing bridge. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Alien forces advanced in perfect formation, their weapons ready to fire. The humans stood shoulder to shoulder, each one already wounded, each one knowing they would not leave alive. The leader of the humans raised his voice, shouting words that echoed even through the old recording, for those who come after. And then they charged. Explosions shook the screen as they fought with a fury that defied reason. Some detonated grenades in their own hands, dragging enemies into the abyss with them. Others used their broken bodies to shield their comrades, giving them seconds more to fight. One soldier, pinned and bleeding, lit the charges strapped to his chest and hurled himself into the largest alien formation. The blast tore through the bridge, collapsing it in fire. The chamber shook with silence. None of the alien leaders could speak. Their claws tapped nervously against the table, their eyes flickering with fear. The veteran's voice was sharp as a blade. This is why their myths are filled with sacrifice. Because for them, it is not madness, it is duty, and that duty gives them power you cannot measure. He pressed the controls again. The next image was darker. Human ships drifted in space, broken and aflame. Alien fleets surrounded them, overwhelming in number. Yet even as their hulls cracked, the humans did not retreat. One by one, their ships turned toward the enemy. Engines flared. The aliens in the chamber stiffened. They knew what was coming. The humans rammed. Their small ships smashed into cruisers and carriers, detonating themselves in blinding fire. Waves of explosions tore through the void, taking giants down with them. The chamber's silence deepened. The veteran's words rumbled like distant thunder. Every empire fears death. Every army fights to avoid it. But humans, they fight knowing it is coming. They embrace it, and in embracing it, they turn death into a weapon. One of the younger commanders shook his head, his voice trembling. No species can fight like this, not forever. They must break. The veteran turned to him, his scarred face lit by the glow of Earth's hologram. His eyes were cold, merciless. They do break, but they rise again, stronger, angrier. Every death makes the next generation fiercer. Every grave becomes a story, and every story becomes a weapon. That is what you face when you face humanity. The screens shifted one last time. The image was not of war, but of aftermath. A field of graves stretched across the land, endless rows of simple markers. Humans stood in silence before them, soldiers, children, families. Some wept, some saluted, but all stood with unbroken eyes. The veteran's voice dropped to a whisper, soft yet unshakable. This is where their strength comes from, they remember. They carry every scar, every loss, every sacrifice. Their myths are not dreams, they are warnings. They remind each generation what it means to be human, and they never forget. The chamber was still. The alien leaders sat frozen, their pride shattered, their arrogance drowned. Fear crept into their hearts, slow and cold. The veteran stepped back, folding his arms across his chest. His gaze swept across the council, unflinching. Now you begin to understand. The ban is not to protect humans from you. It is to protect you from them. Because if the ban fails, if they are unleashed again, the galaxy will not laugh. The galaxy will burn. The golden projection of Earth shimmered above the table, silent and eternal, casting its light across the chamber. The laughter that once filled the hall was gone forever, replaced by a silence that weighed heavier than war itself. And, in that silence, the alien leaders finally began to fear. The council chamber felt colder now. The smoke from the torches swirled low across the floor, curling around the boots of the alien leaders. None of them laughed anymore. None dared whisper. The golden projection of Earth glowed above the war table, casting a silent light over faces that were no longer proud, but unsettled. The veteran stood unmoving, his scarred armor shining faintly in the glow. His eyes swept across the chamber, weighing each soldier, each general, each commander. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before, but sharper too, each word cutting into the silence like a blade. You have seen their battles, you have seen their sacrifices. Now you must understand the truth that makes them different. Their true weapon is not their bodies, it is not their ships, it is not even their courage. Their weapon is belief. The alien leaders shifted in their seats. Some frowned, confused. One braver than the others, let out a scoff. Belief. Words and dreams do not win wars. The veteran's eyes narrowed. His voice grew heavier, steady as stone. No, belief does not win wars. But it creates something more dangerous than any fleet or weapon. It creates a will that cannot be broken. He turned to the controls again. The screens lit up with new footage. This time it was not soldiers in combat, not ships in flames. It was a camp at night. Humans sat around fires, their faces lit by the glow, their voices carrying stories. They spoke of warriors who had fought when all hope was lost. They spoke of cities that had risen from ashes. They spoke of heroes who had stood alone and held back armies. The alien leaders frowned. Stories. One muttered, nothing but stories. The veteran's voice rose. Calm but fierce. That is what you do not understand. Their stories are not lies. They are scars. They are lessons carved into memory. Every child grows up hearing them. Every soldier marches with them in his heart. These stories teach them one truth, that surrender is worse than death. The screen shifted again. This time, the footage showed a group of young human recruits standing before an older veteran. His uniform was tattered, his body scarred, but his voice was strong. He told them of a battle long past, of comrades who had fallen, of defiance that had turned defeat into legend. The recruits listened, their eyes burning, their fists clenched. The alien leaders could see it, the fire passing from one generation to the next. A chain unbroken. The veteran stepped forward, his shadow stretching across the table. This is what you must fear. Not their weapons, not their armies, but the fire that never dies. They are taught from birth that to be human is to defy, that to stand, even when broken, is the greatest honor, that to rise after falling is their duty. And so they do. The chamber was silent, the alien leaders shifting uneasily in their chairs. Some lowered their eyes, unwilling to meet the scarred gaze of the veteran. The footage shifted once more. A battlefield after war. Ruins smoldered, the dead lay in silence. Yet among them, humans rose again. Children carried bricks to rebuild walls. Women planted seeds in burned soil. Soldiers stood guard over shattered streets. The world was broken, but the humans did not stay broken. The veteran's voice echoed, heavy and unyielding. Do you see? Even in ruin, they rise. Even in ash, they burn. Their belief tells them they cannot be defeated, because every loss is only the beginning of the next fight. This is why their myths matter. They are not decorations. They are warnings. One of the commanders finally spoke, his voice strained. But such fire cannot last forever. No flame burns without end. The veteran turned his cold eyes on him. You are wrong. Their fire does not fade. It passes, from the dead to the living, from the old to the young, from one generation to the next. And each time it passes, it burns brighter. That is why every empire that faced them has fallen. That is why the ban was made. The chamber grew still again. The weight of his words pressed against every heart. The alien leaders could feel it now. The truth they had mocked only hours ago now crawled under their skin, cold and relentless. The golden sphere of earth glowed brighter above the table, as if the world itself listened. The veteran folded his arms across his chest, his voice dropping lower, carrying finality. You thought belief was weakness. You thought myths were lies. Now you see, humans do not carry myths for comfort. They carry them as weapons. And when they fight, they do not fight alone. They fight with every story, every scar, every soul that came before them. Tell me, how do you defeat such an enemy? The chamber was silent. No one answered. The question hung in the air like a shadow, heavier than any truth they had ever heard. The veteran stepped back, his gaze hard, his presence filling the hall. You cannot, and that is why you laugh no more. The silence deepened. The alien leaders sat frozen, the weight of humanity's truth pressing on their hearts. And in that silence, the myths they once mocked had become something else, something they would never forget. The chamber was heavy with silence now, so thick it seemed to press against the walls themselves. The golden sphere of earth glowed faintly above the council table, its light falling across the uneasy faces of the alien leaders. They no longer mocked, they no longer whispered. Their arrogance had been broken piece by piece, and what remained was fear they could not admit aloud. The veteran stood like an unmovable shadow, his scarred armor creaking as he reached for the controls again. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. You think you understand now. You think you know why humans were banned, but you have seen only the edge of the truth. The deepest reason is still hidden, and now, you will see it. The screens flared to life. At first, the image was a ruined battlefield, dark and lifeless. Ash blew across the ground, and smoke curled from the wreckage of ships and weapons. The aliens leaned forward, their eyes narrowing, expecting nothing more than silence. But then the movement came. From beneath rubble, humans dragged themselves out. Their armor was torn, their bodies broken. Some crawled with shattered legs. Some bled so heavily their clothes were soaked red. Yet instead of collapsing, they reached for weapons. They rose. The chamber stirred. One alien commander muttered under his breath, "Impossible." The veteran's voice was sharp. "This is the truth. No matter how many times you think they have fallen, they rise again. Even when they should be dead, they fight. Even when their bodies give out, their will carries them forward. What empire can face such a foe?" The footage shifted to another scene, a trench war. Human soldiers were cornered, outnumbered, surrounded by alien forces. Their lines were broken, their ammunition was almost gone. The aliens in the chamber leaned forward, waiting for surrender, for retreat, but the humans did not surrender. The screen shook with their screams as they leapt from the trenches, charging headlong into enemy fire. They carried explosives strapped to their bodies, detonating themselves in blinding bursts that consumed whole squads. Others, armed with nothing but knives or broken rifles, hurled themselves into hand-to-hand combat, fighting until their last breath. The chamber gasped. The alien leaders' claws clenched against the table, their bodies rigid. None dared speak. Now, the veteran's eyes swept across them. You call it madness, and perhaps it is. But what weapon can defeat an enemy who turns death itself into victory? How do you fight one who uses the grave as a blade? The images changed again. This time, the vast emptiness of space filled the screen. Alien fleets glided through the void in perfect order, their ships gleaming like blades. Human ships appeared, smaller, weaker, their numbers far fewer. The council leaned forward again. They expected destruction, they expected defeat, but once again, they were wrong. The human ships did not flee. They cut engines, drifting close, then reignited them with furious speed. They rammed into cruisers, into carriers, into giants, many times their size. Each impact shook the void with explosions so bright the chamber itself glowed. Human crews detonated their own reactors, sacrificing entire ships to bring down vessels far greater. The council leaders flinched at the sight. Their scales, their hides, their armored plates all felt cold under the golden glow. The veteran's voice rumbled low. This is why they are feared. Because they are the only species that will burn themselves to ash if it means dragging their enemy into the fire with them. You cannot defeat such an enemy. You can only hope to survive their fury. The screen froze on one haunting image, a single human frigate, aflame, drifting through space, its crew visible through shattered windows. They stood at their posts, saluting even as fire consumed them. The chamber was silent. Not a breath, not a whisper. The veteran stepped closer to the table, his presence towering over the leaders. You once mocked their myths. You laughed at tales of soldiers who fought after death. of fleets that turned defeat into victory. But you have seen the truth now. Their myths are not exaggerations. They are not fairy tales. They are history. They are warnings, and if you ignore them, they will become your future. The golden hologram of Earth above the table pulsed faintly, as though alive. One of the younger commanders, his voice barely more than a whisper, spoke. But how do they endure such things? How do they keep rising? The veterans, eyes, sharp and cold, turned toward him. His voice was quiet, but it filled the chamber like thunder, because for them there is no choice. To be human is to fight. To be human is to endure. To be human is to rise, even when broken. This is their curse, and this is their power. The chamber's silence grew heavier. Fear spread among the leaders, not just of humans, but of the possibility that the ban might one day fail, that the galaxy might once again face the storm they thought was buried. The veteran folded his arms across his chest, his scarred face unshaken. Now you know. Death does not end them. Fire does not stop them. Even silence cannot break them. They are not prey. They are the storm itself. The screen faded to black. The golden glow of Earth was the only light left in the chamber. It shimmered above them, casting shadows that felt too heavy, too real. And in those shadows, every alien leader realized the truth. The ban was not a warning to humanity. It was a shield to protect the galaxy, and if that shield ever broke, the silence they feared tonight would spread across the stars. The chamber was darker than ever, though no torch had gone out. The golden sphere of Earth still hovered above the council table, glowing faintly, but to the alien leaders it no longer looked harmless. Its light felt heavier now, as if the world itself was watching them, daring them to laugh again. None of them did. The silence pressed down like a living thing. Every leader sat frozen, their claws, their talons, their armored fingers drumming nervously against the stone. The air was thick, filled not with pride or mockery, but with a growing shadow none could shake. The veteran stood at the head of the hall, his scarred face half hidden in the light. He had not moved for a long time, letting the silence do what words could not. The leaders shifted uneasily under his gaze, but none dared speak. At last, his voice came, low and sharp. Now you know why the ban was written, not out of fear, not out of weakness, but out of necessity. His words cut through the stillness like blades. The leaders glanced at one another, but no one answered. Their earlier laughter seemed far away, now almost foolish, like the voices of children who did not understand what they mocked. The veteran raised his hand. The screens flickered to life one last time. The image was simple. A human child sat in the rubble of a ruined city, listening. As an old man spoke to him, the child's eyes burned with the same fire the council had seen in soldiers, in martyrs, in the dead who refused to fall. The veteran's voice carried over the image. This is how they endure. This is why they rise. They do not forget. They pass their fire from one generation to the next. When their bodies fall, their stories rise. When their armies die, their children remember. That is why every scar becomes a weapon. That is why every myth becomes a warning. The child in the image clenched his small fists, his eyes fixed on the ruined skyline as though ready to rebuild it with his own hands. The council shifted uneasily. The image faded, but its weight did not. The veteran stepped closer to the table. His voice grew colder. You have seen humans in war. You have seen them in ruin. You have seen them in death. Yet still, they rise. And this is the truth you cannot face. They are never finished. No battle ends them. No grave silences them. They return, always stronger, always fiercer, until those who mocked them are gone. The leaders sat rigid. Some stared at the floor, unwilling to meet his gaze. Others clenched their jaws, fighting the fear crawling into their bones. The veteran's scarred hand pressed against the council table. His shadow stretched across the chamber, long and heavy. You laughed at their ban. You thought it a joke, a relic of old fear, but tonight you have seen. Tonight you understand. The ban is the wall that protects you, not them. It is the shield that holds back the fire, and if it fails, he paused. The silence deepened, pressing into every corner of the chamber. His voice dropped lower, a whisper that struck harder than a shout. If it fails, then no empire, no fleet, no world will escape what comes. The leaders shuddered. The younger ones swallowed hard, their arrogance shattered, their pride broken. The veteran straightened, his scarred armor creaking as he turned toward the doors at the far end of the hall. His steps echoed slowly, each one heavy, each one a reminder of the truths he had left behind. The chamber did not move. None dared breathe too loud. Just before he reached the doors, he stopped. Without turning back, his voice carried one last time, soft but final. Remember this night. Remember the silence that followed your laughter, for it will return, and when it does, it will not be silence, it will be the end. The massive doors opened with a hiss, spilling white light into the chamber. His silhouette was framed for a heartbeat, tall and unyielding. Before the doors closed behind him with a thunderous crash, the council remained in darkness. For a long time, no one spoke. The leaders sat rigid, their minds haunted by images they could not erase: the soldiers who would not fall, the ships that turned death into fire, the graves that gave birth to stories. Finally, one of the younger commanders whispered, his voice trembling perhaps, "The ban must never be lifted." No one argued, no one laughed. The silence held them all, colder than any battlefield, heavier than any war. Above them, the golden projection of Earth continued to glow, its light steady, eternal, not a world of myths, not a symbol of weakness, but a warning carved into the stars. And every alien in that chamber knew the truth now. Humans were not gone, humans were waiting, and when they returned, no laughter in the galaxy would ever rise again.